Hello. This is the first chapter of my novel, currently called Mind the Gap. Chapter 1, The Impossible Shot. Darren was an Essex boy. He'd never been to Camden Town before, and looking at the bunch of weirdos who got on at Tottenham Court Road heading up the Northern Line, he could see why. This was not his world, and he felt a proper prat in his thin disguise as a skate punk. Leaving Camden Town station, he was struck by a smell that was both inviting and unwholesome. A mixture of kebab meat, incense and weed. It was dark, warm and still, allowing the sounds of music, cars and bustling people to carry from the lights of the pubs and clubs to the relative quiet outside the station. It baffled Darren as to why he'd been chosen for this mission. He stuck out like a sore thumb round here. Oh Christ, he thought, look at that lot! He watched a small bunch of goths walk past, talking and laughing. They looked so relaxed, so right in this grand capital of freaks. He started walking towards the canal and found himself surrounded by the sort of people he'd only ever seen in the minority before. Punks, goths, metalers, cyberpunks, skaters and emo kids mingled and milled about all around him. He carried on down to the canal and found the door he was looking for a little way up past the touristy area. He looked for a moment at the still black water, feeling both allured and repelled, before following some punks into the club. The noise was terrible. Darren was used to loud music, but he couldn't get his head around this heavy guitar stuff. Jesus Christ, these people are weird, he thought, as he looked up at the stage and saw the lead singer of the band had massive golden wings on his back. Then he saw something that made his stomach turn. A girl with similar wings flew from the crush of people near the front of the stage to a mezzanine floor overlooking the dance floor. Must be wires, Darren thought. She was followed by a guy who jumped up, pulled himself onto a ledge sticking out of the wall and dived towards the railings of the mezzanine, where a few people helped to pull him up. He wondered where the wires had gone, but then someone else flew down from the mezzanine and landed near him. There were no wires. He looked closely and there were definitely no wires. As he stood there staring, Darren found that his mouth was completely dry and his hands were shaking. He was completely oblivious to the gleeful faces of those around him, loving the music, drinking bright pink drinks and dancing with their friends. As the song finished, Darren was gently jostled as people made their way back to the bar from the dance floor, and as the band was starting up the next song, he realised that the lead singer was staring at him. The singer's icy blue eyes were fixed on his face. An acrid smell, the clash of steel, people screaming and the chaos of a city in flames. Darren blinked and the impression was gone as quickly as it had appeared. The singer glanced down at his guitar before picking someone else out in the crowd. He looked from this other person to Darren, who looked across the room to see that a bearded man was looking at him, as well as the singer. Darren suddenly remembered Simon Didymus's words. If they know you're spying, they might just kill you. They knew. The singer nodded toward him, and the bearded man started making his way over. Run. He bundled out of the club and started to run up the road. The man was following him. Darren regretted making a bolt for the closing station very soon after he'd done it. He bounded down the steps with his heart hammering in his chest. Through the winding tunnels he ran, and was not able to distinguish his footsteps from his pursuers. He leapt over the gates and dived down the escalator about 2 minutes before the man with the dark hair did and pulled out his gun. Darren fell down the second half of the escalator and lost time trying to get up. He shambled down the platform, jumping down next to the tracks and ran up the tunnel. His pursuer fired a shot that shattered the tilework behind Darren's head. Oh fuck, he muttered in absolute despair as he almost felt the bullet whistle past the back of his head. He was running on pure survival instinct now. The cognitive part of his brain knew his number had been called. He ran around the bend in total darkness, guiding himself by keeping his hand on some wires that ran along the side of the tunnel. I wouldn't be surprised if the fucker can see in the dark, he thought as the gun fired a second time. The bullet rounded the corner and lodged itself in the back of Darren's head. Apparently, people saw him start running by the canal. He then ran down the high road and into the station. All of this with this bloke with dark curly hair and a beard chasing him. No one can say anything else about this man other than that he had short dark curly hair, was in his 20s and about average height, the Unconstable was saying. No one reckons they could positively identify him. Great, this Detective Inspector Spinel said. She scratched her head and wished she hadn't tied her braids back quite so tightly. Apathy. Where would this city be without it? And people ask us why we don't do more to stop this gangland shit. You reckon it's a hit then? Well, it was an execution-style killing, cold and apparently unprovoked. There's only two things that bother me though. One, I can't imagine too many gang members being prepared to chase someone down like that in a public place. And two, you see where the body is? The body was lying face down on the side of the tracks. Well, it looks like he was hit spot on in the middle of the head. And he was around that main bend when he was shot. Now look at the angle of the bend. You'd never get a shot that straight unless you're at point blank range. And the forensic chap tells me that the shot wasn't taken at point blank range. So how the bloody hell was it taken? It was pitch dark, there's no sign of a ricochet, and the angle wouldn't have been right anyway. In fact, forensics believe that the shot was taken from at least 100 yards away. Now, unless the bullet bent round the corner, I can't see how that's possible. Didn't Sherlock Holmes say that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever is left, no matter how improbable, must be the truth? He did. But once you eliminate the impossible here, what does it leave you with? The constable looked at her. She was tall, black and imposing. Nothing, Constable, that's what, she said. The impossible shot headline on the front page of the newspaper didn't worry Shamina Sarwar an awful lot. What worried Shamina was the fact that she found herself liking the secretary who had been transferred from corporate recovery to her department the month before. Penny seemed to be either off sick, in late, at lunch for hours on end, or cheeking the managers left, right and centre. She also happened to be the best typist in the building, and the accountants actually got their letters back more eloquently written than they'd dictated them. The atmosphere in the office was stifling. The air conditioning only worked in the manager's office, and both Shamina and Penny had sweat running down their backs. Penny was reading a sci-fi book that Shamina looked at and let out a derisive puff. What? Penny said. Just 'cause you're a muggle? A what? Shamina said. Never mind, what are you reading that's so serious and adult anyway? Paper. Duh. Actually, it would probably appeal to you. There's a story about someone who got shot on the underground. They say they can't work out how the bullet got to him without bending round the corner. Cool. Maybe it was alien technology. I knew you'd say something like that. What's your theory then? I don't know. Maybe some experimental weaponry they're keeping secret. Uh-oh, I can feel a conspiracy theory coming on. What? You think everything's a conspiracy. I don't. Well, no, I don't. Penny gave her a meaningful look. All right, you must admit, though, Simon Didymus is a bit mysterious. Yeah, I suppose so. I wish I could have some salt and vinegar on these. Shamina was eating chips out of a bag. You should have had some, bugger what your mum says. But it's Ramadan. So you shouldn't be eating them at all then. Surely it's between you and Allah. Allah is a good God. He'll forgive me. Mum won't though. Penny smiled. Where do you think Simon Didymus came from then? I don't know, I haven't given it much thought. But it's so intriguing. It is a bit. It's not the best mystery though. Do you remember Angela? Angela? Yeah, Angela Wigley. She used to sit next to me in corporate recovery. Oh yeah, she's the one that went mental with a big pole and smashed up the office. It was amazing. The coolest thing I've ever seen. Did you see the whole thing? Yeah. I had her on after I got over the shock. I think the most amazing thing though was the makeover she'd had. Makeover? She went from having long, drippy looking hair, a pale face and lame suits, to short pixie hair, a tan and grungy clothes. And her arms, they were really hunky. And she'd been skinny as a marshwiggle a month before. I used to call her a marshwiggle and she called me a hobbit. That doesn't mean anything to you, does it? No, I don't watch Doctor Who. Hey? Anyway, what's your fascination with Simon Didymus? He's just like a good-looking Richard Branson, isn't he? His businesses make Richard Branson look small-time. He came out of nowhere and started buying up everything. Ooh, super businessman. What did he start off as? No one knows. Someone must do. The Financial Times doesn't. Since when did you read the Financial Times? I thought you read the Express. I started looking through it for stuff about his company. Weirdo. You're like a little girl with a crush, except you're obsessed with a businessman rather than a boy band. Don't be silly, I'm just interested. Did you know he was trying to buy Microsoft off Bill Gates? Have you got pictures of him on your bedroom wall? Shut up! I think he's got something to do with the mafia. You'll be in a real tiz when he takes over this company next month, won't you? You've got a Simon Didymus nude calendar and a Simon Didymus pencil case. I don't have crushes. No, you don't really, do you? Angela did. She fancied one of those creeps in accounts. Those lot gave me a really funny look when I mentioned that my name meant beautiful in Arabic. You tell everyone that. And they all give me that funny look. Well, they all think that you have to be blonde and have big tits to be beautiful. Shamina didn't say anything. There was always a busker near one of the entrances to Bank Station, and Shamina sometimes gave him money. She hadn't seen him that morning, but as she turned the corner of Threadneedle Street on her way home, she noticed that there was a different busker on the same spot. The usual busker was a chubby black man with a saxophone, and now there was a skinny white man with a guitar in his place. The man was sitting cross-legged with an acoustic guitar in his lap and a hat out in front of him with some change in. The weird thing about him was that he had huge golden wings attached to his back that looked far too big to have come from a normal costume shop. What a funny gimmick for a busker, she thought. Shamina stopped to listen to him for a minute. He was playing something very unusual and gently singing in a beautiful but slightly unnerving falsetto. As she looked down at him, he looked up at her. He looked about 15 years old and had a very bony face with pale skin, black hair and striking blue eyes. She found herself thinking that he should be in school when a random sensation cut into her thoughts. The creaking of a deck, salty sea air, sweat and the sound of men rushing around pulling ropes and running up sails on thousands of ships crossing an azure sea. Shamina shook off this momentary image and looked again at the busker. His hair was unkempt and his clothes were very ragged, but Shamina didn't notice these. She was captivated by those eyes. There was something wrong with them. They were too vivid or too blue or something. She couldn't put her finger on it. She gradually began to notice that there was something odd about those wings too. They moved. They shuffled about slightly with the music and twitched as he looked up. It was some trick all right, brilliant but a bit scary. Eventually she tore herself away and went down the stairs to the station. End of chapter 1.